So to work with our illustrious panel, we have invited Peter Selwood to moderate. Let me put my glasses on. This is on, right? Peter has held the role of Executive Director of Centacare Brisbane since 2001, having been employed by the Archdiocesan Development Fund for the preceding 10 years. So a long story, too long a story. Centacare provides a wide range of disability, aged care, family, pastoral and childcare services throughout South East Queensland, employing more than 3,000 workers. Peter's former directorships include Catholic Social Services Australia Limited, Australian Catholic Superannuation Retirement Fund, Your Talent, and Mercy Health and Aged Care Central Queensland Limited. He has also served on a number of Catholic school councils and committees, including currently as chair of the Marriage College Astro Advisory Council. Thank you, Peter.
Thanks everyone, good morning. Great to have you all here. It's a good session, hopefully an interactive one. We'll give you plenty of time to ask some questions. We have three presenters here who have great expertise and great knowledge of the issues of housing and homelessness, which confront all of us, confront every community, rural, urban, regional. Housing and homelessness doesn't discriminate either. It's not a matter of what job you have, what you earn. It can be a challenge to everybody. So these examples are all different. These examples are real, and there's something to learn from here for all of us, I believe. One of the challenges we have, I think, with housing that I continue to witness is it's politicised. It's used as a political weapon. There is jurisdictional challenges between state and federal, and it's fascinating to watch, but so frustrating to see that nothing's happening to the extent it needs to. But these three examples that you'll hear about this morning are wonderful. So could you please welcome Jayne, Stella and Graham to the So we'll just spend a few minutes listening to each speak, to explain their program. They're all very interesting, as I said. Jayne, you sat there, so you're first.
Is that on?
Yes.
Okay. So just to tell a little bit about our housing project, firstly just to situate our story of CatholicCare in the Northern Territory. So we're a diocese that covers the whole of the Northern Territory, and we deliver all sorts of programs right through from APY land up to the Tiwi Islands, and we do a lot of things, including housing support, but had never been in the space of actually delivering housing before. And over time, and I've been at CatholicCare for well over 20 odd years, is that more and more the issue of housing is getting in the way of us being able to deliver the services that we need to do. So it's really hard when you're working with a family. You would know all of this sort of stuff, working with a family, whether it's around a financial issue, a parenting issue, around domestic and family violence. If there isn't housing, it's really hard to get to that stage of recovery or repair or helping people to move on and do the things they want to do in their lives. So it's something that was always a challenge for us. And in the Northern Territory, we are small. Our population is around 250,000 people. We're only 1% of the Australian population. So often it's hard to have our voice amplified and for us to attract the funding and the means to do the work that we want to do. Of our population, 30% of our population is Aboriginal people, and that's made up of 4 urban towns, one of them being Darwin, 73 remote communities and 500 outstations. So we're spread right across the Northern Territory. Just like CatholicCare, we have place-based services in over 17 locations across the Territory. And there's just a huge unmet need for housing in the Northern Territory, and I think our housing rate is much greater than anywhere else in Australia. And 73% of our public housing is for Aboriginal people, and 88% of our homelessness population is Aboriginal. And getting people into the private rental market is nearly impossible, both in the area of affordability and appropriateness. And we've not had any really new public housing in many, many years. So massive wait lists, all of those kinds of things that people would know about. So we've been considering how we could respond as an agency and do our bit around housing. And we started thinking about it a number of years ago, and we went through the process of getting accredited as a housing provider, community housing provider. There's only a handful in the Territory. We weren't interested in taking on government stock. We were wanting to do housing in a way that contributed to building more supply, and also about how we could respond to our particular cohort of people that we were trying to support. And one of the things that we did in our thinking, we came across an opportunity to purchase a big block of land in Darwin, just on the outskirts of Darwin, so it's probably 10 minutes from the CBD, which is sort of in a block that's quite a bush block. It has some rundown houses and a business that was operating as a visitor accommodation service, which was mainly people from remote communities coming in for towns to go to court, for health, visiting family could come and stay at this centre, pay $30 a night and get 3 meals a day. So we had the opportunity to purchase this, and we thought about it, and it was quite I see Sister Leanne laughing because it sounds a simple process, but it was actually a couple of year process to purchase this block of land, because we went through the process, we went through all of the negotiation. It was a very small sort of evangelical church who had held the property for many years, and they were very cautious about who they would be selling it to. They weren't too keen about selling it to Catholics, but we got around all of that. And then I was meeting with the department, the Territory Families and Housing Department one day, and I said to them in passing, "Oh look, we've purchased that visitor accommodation centre out at Berrima," and her face literally went white. And she was like, "Oh, okay, all right." Then I got back, by the time I got back to the office, I had phone calls, and I had people from the department coming, visiting us and saying, "You can't buy that property, we're actually buying that property." And I said, "Well, we just signed a contract," and they're like, "Well, we're actually going to, we've gone to the minister and we're going to stop you from, we're sorry, we're all friends, but you're not going to buy this property because we've actually done a valuation and we were in train to purchase it." So we went through a very long process of wrangling with the department over who would get to purchase the property, and eventually it went up to the minister, the lands minister, who gave us and the department 3 months to come to a resolution around who would buy the property. So needless to say, we ended up getting the property, and so it went on for so long that when we finally got it, we were like, "Oh, okay, now we own this visitor accommodation business." And what we decided to do was that we would just run this visitor accommodation service in an interim while we decided what we would want to do next with it and how we would turn it into what we hope would be a service for these families that we were supporting. So we had the vision, we didn't have the money, but it gave us a lot of space to actually start thinking even more deeply about the kind of services that we wanted to be able to deliver from that site. But we also then realised in taking on that visitor accommodation that there was even greater need than we had first had thought about, because we were mainly servicing and supporting families, but then we realised this whole issue of renal disease, which people would know about or hear about, but suddenly it was right on our front doorstep. And the Northern Territory has the highest rate of kidney disease in Australia, and 80% of people with renal disease have to relocate into Darwin, sometimes Springs. And even though there is some in-country dialysis, a lot of people with kidney failure actually have chronic conditions, so they're constantly having to come into Darwin. And what we were realising is that people were wanting to live permanently in our visitor accommodation because they could get meals. It was like in a really nice setting, not nice setting like this, but nice setting as in a bush kind of setting. And so we then realised that we would have to, we had this whole new group of people who we were now working with who had even more severe housing needs, and the public waiting list in Darwin for a bed for someone with renal diseases around 6 to 8 years. And if you have a chronic kidney disease, your life expectancy is around 6 years. So we have a lot of people who are then living rough in Darwin, accessing dialysis. So we started to think about our vision, how we could actually create a community that could accommodate sort of an all abilities type community. So we're looking to build, it's almost like a little suburb that has a community that can accommodate a broad range of people where they'll have access to nature. So I think even thinking about the talk yesterday, so around nature, environment, access to space, around having access to spiritual and cultural activities, and having places for visitors and visitor management. So we'll still retain a visitor centre within that community, and how we integrate and actually have a suburb, but where you can also have access to meals and food and other services. So we have this dream of this community, and we've just started in recent months doing the master planning for that. We are looking now at how we actually fund that, and we kind of think it's possible. It might take us 5 years or 10 years, but we really see this as something that we can do and that we can do ourselves and be really responsive to the community rather than having to accept funding and try and make it work, that we can actually come up with a dream and a vision and try and make it happen for these real people who are experiencing real vulnerabilities in their lives.
Thanks, Kat, very much. An urban view from Stella.
An urban view, okay. Last year, Good Shepherd celebrated our 160 years in Australia, and we designed these T-shirts called Choose Zeal, because zeal is one of our longest standing values, and as well as audacity. And we put out there in the new strategy, the next 5-year strategy we're in the process of implementing, how are we going to change things in an ecosystem way into the future? And I think, like many of you here, I can't unknow as a previous 23 years of age. I was a corrections officer at Barwon Prison. I've been worked into multiple roles in different organisations and the CEO in Uniting, as well as here for the last 6 years. And sadly, I've seen 3 generations of the one family on my watch. And we can't unknow that. We can't unknow that we are not disrupting anything. And we've got more and more ambulances at the bottom of the hill for all of the incredible work we do. And I have loved and been proud of all of the organisations that I've been part of. This is my favourite, and I've got a couple of sisters at the back there, to truly being a women's organisation built by women for women, where the strategy is calling out zeal and audacity, and let's do things differently. How do we build villages around housing? How do we actually stop becoming addicted to government funding for service models we know are not disrupting anything? And I know the challenges of funding those service models, and they are real and they are there, and we need to do continued advocacy and education around why those unit costs and service models are really important. But we also have these balance sheets. And so it was put to me, a question actually, I'm not sure if it was you, Anne Dalton, or Monica Walsh in my interview, and you said, give us 2 audacious ideas and we'll let you use the balance sheet. And as I said, you go, the CEOs here, like, you never hear those words. I come from Uniting Church, and there was the property trust over here, and honestly, and I love the Uniting Church. I was there for 15 years and 2 babies, but we always used to say, even if Jesus knocked on the property trust door, they wouldn't let him in because they're too scared he's going to give away all the property. So how are we going to deliver on our mission in a way that starts risking for mission on things that we know are emerging in our time? So I got commitment, and in this new strategic plan, we called that out, and we called out in our impact areas that we are going to be prepared to leverage our assets for local projects of enablement that we will then share, and also call out that we don't have to do everything ourselves. And that is one of the extraordinary, elements of DNA that I didn't know until I got to Good Shepherd. We have always worked with and through others. We've been delivering the no interest loan scheme as an organisation for 41 years, and 20 years ago we started a partnership with NAB around that, and some significant funding from DSS. We could have 20 years ago made a decision to have brought all of that funding into a centralised vortex and done it all ourselves. Instead, we delivered a no interest loan program through 173 organisations outside of us in 600 locations to 40,000 people, 27% of whom come from, and I think you're one of our partners, are from Aboriginal communities. So how do we think about our collective impact when we start looking at sharing our resources and capabilities? And not everyone has to be the owner of everything. But what is the enabling aspect we can each do around where we are really, really good at? So I pitched 2 audacious ideas. One was the transformation in a strategy, and the second one was senior women's housing, particularly for multicultural backgrounds. They are the silent of the silent. We had a little block of land in Marrickville. That was an office space in Marrickville Road, and I was given permission to start looking at that last year, and we put that on the table as leveraging our balance sheet. And that's probably worth around $3 million on a balance sheet. And just on that, we started a co-investment discussion with philanthropy and our corporate partners. Philanthropy came to the table straight away and agreed to fund the housing manager we need. We're not a housing provider, and we're not seeking to be a housing provider. They are funding the project officer because we are leveraging our assets. And there we were minding our own business on 8 units we thought we were building, and the big sign came up on the property next door, a former 5,500 squares, and expressions of interest for sale. And I thought, well, Sister Monica did come to the Finance and Risk Committee and direct them to Risk Commission. So let's cause an out-of-session committee meeting and invite, I think Sister Caroline Price was there, and Sister Nolene White, who had worked in Marrickville for many years. And Sister Nolene actually opened up the batting in front of the Finance and Risk Committee, saying, I tell you, I think this is a miracle because we have been praying for this for years. And it got signed off. I mean, yes, the strategic plan was there and it called it out, and we have a board that absolutely is committed for that. And we are talking about an organisation, we're not that big, folks, but we are wanting to disrupt ourselves and our sector a little bit in saying this is now $21 million of our balance sheet on the table to build a village and to build it in a way where mission and the way we want to deliver mission is at the heart of that. And in a way that gives us some power to do some negotiation around how we can build this village. And when you have got skin in the game, you've got a different point of leverage. So both of the banks are actually come to the party and making contributions. A number of philanthropic organisations want to, because I'm not asking for a handout. I'm saying this is our contribution on the table, match it. And then we go to government last. We're actually going to government last because we want to make sure they are funding how we want to do the work and build a village. We have started with the women and they've already done the co-design around how this village can look like. And some of the things that are already emerging, that they don't want a cafe there because they all cook much better than what they'll get at the cafe. They want a podiatrist and a physio and a nurse, and they'd love some spaces where the grandchildren can come and visit, and they would love to have other women and children on site. So we are now also building 5 longer-term wellbeing recovery centres for women recovering from family violence, not in a refuge sense. We run many refuges. We've got 14 refuges that we run. That's not the model that's the best fit for the women. They need recovery. They need a place longer. Kids might need an early years centre, so we are looking at that as part of the village. Allied health support services and programs. So it truly is village building that is meeting the demand of what's emerging from the community and what government is saying, and doing the work around what our mission is asking for us. And it has taken some absolute audacious, courageous board members and sisters to have really come around the table and go, yeah, we're going to risk the mission. No, it's property in Marrickville. Like, you're not going to lose money on that. And so that's been the beginning of where we are now at in terms of our partnership and the design work on the project, and the fact that it's the Prime Minister's electorate. I'm not sure, we haven't worked out if that's a help or a hindrance yet.
This is a conference about hope and about the common good and the common world, and I find myself sitting on the fence a little bit. I believe that we need to be a beacon of hope. Our logo in Amelie Housing, it's the Vincent de Paul Society of Housing Australia, as any is hope through housing. But I also find myself, similar to some of the reflections that Mark was talking about, really worried about the direction we're heading in terms of this sector. So I'm going to give you a couple of points of hope, and then I'm going to give you a couple of points of concern. And my hope is that we can actually respond to those and change things a bit. And I'm also very conscious of Professor Amelie Housing, who I know is a friend of many of you in the past. That community development takes a long time. You don't just do a project and then walk out. Building the capacity within a community takes years. I think it was at least 7 years, if minimum 10 years. And the other part about my experience, I am atoning for my sins. I served in government, I was a minister for a number of years, is that public policy goes backwards as well as it goes forwards. And you've always got to keep your eye on that. So my hopeful thing is, well, we manage about 1,500 houses, so we're a small provider. We operate in 4 states and territories. We operate in New South Wales, ACT, Tasmania and South Australia. I can operate anywhere else, and of course for that's all we've got for money. We recently, in the last few years, completed 502 homes of accommodation across 14 sites, so medium residential, and we had support from the New South Wales government to do that. The wonderful thing about that program was we didn't just build 502 units of accommodation, we had funding for support services to be wrapped around. And that is unusual in housing. Recently, we had the University of New South Wales go and interview and talk to our residents. And they discovered that the outcomes for our residents were on par with, in almost all categories, the outcomes for residents who weren't in social housing. That was the and they were well above those in social housing. That's the difference wraparound support services. And I think that's an incredibly hopeful thing. We'll go and share that, and we'll go and talk about that, and you all know about that. On the other hand, what I'm really concerned about is the way we are moving away from recognition that you can't have housing without the services to create community. And it is wonderful that 10 billion has been put aside to create this fund, the HAF, Home Australia Future Fund. But it's a very market-based process. Not all that money gets spent on homes. It goes to reinvest that and use the balance sheet, I guess, as a way, but actually use the income streams. And they'll start getting repayments in 15 and 25 years. And I know that people at Home Australia are good people and they care. And I know that they believe that they can create a sector that can stand on its own 2 feet. But you can't actually do that if you want to deal with the most vulnerable. If you want to cherry pick your clients and, like sometimes in the aged care sector, you can go and chase the full market, you can chase the affordable market, and then you say, yeah, we're still doing mission no because we've got this percentage. In the end, it's less, 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 until you're actually a full market provider. That's the risk this is creating. The thing that drives me crazy about this new approach is it's almost entirely loan-based. Which means in the past, the poorest members of our community were paying a rental, which did things like cover the maintenance, allow you to spend a bit more money on actually supporting them. The new model is the poorest members of the community are actually paying for the houses that we're building for them. They're actually not getting an equity sharing, which means we're actually entrenching poverty and disadvantage in those families. There is no hand up in that type of model. There are some houses that get built, but it's not the way of saying to those communities, here's your end up in the poverty. Now, sure, education works, investing in all those programs work. But if we're actually trying to address that fundamental disadvantage of our incomes, then we take a lot of people's incomes and actually buying services. And it's even worse, the dirty little secret in the community housing industry. Maybe it's not a dirty secret, it's dirty though, is we cherry pick our clients if we want to make that sort of model work. If you're a person on a disability pension, if you're a person on an age pension, you as community housing provider can make that work without huge subsidy. You can cover your costs. Someone on unemployment benefits, they don't increase like inflation. You saw that increase recently. So therefore, you take on a risk that actually will start with nothing. And the thing is, if you're on youth allowance, then immediately you start running out of loss. And I think we should be using our balance sheets. We should be out there spending the money for us as a church. But I don't think we should be letting governments off the hook and saying that the Commonwealth is actually our responsibility. The Commonwealth is everybody's responsibility. We have a taxation system so that we can help people who have a disadvantage, so we can build common goods, roads, railways, all those sort of things. But it's also about making sure that we create a more just society. I really worry that we're doing all these things, that we're dumping money in these funds. It's full market, it's run by bankers. Bankers are good people and certainly can't beat them. You know, you work for good ones. But we're missing that heart that said we as a community will not accept that anyone lives in poverty. We're not accepting the fact that 90,000 people are on our homeless waiting list in New South Wales, and almost 10% of them on the priority housing list. To be on a priority housing list means you're possibly living in family violence. You're sometimes sleeping in the streets. You're in our crisis accommodation. So I'm a hopeful person. I believe we can do these things. I've seen we negotiated an agreement with the New South Wales government to try and focus on homelessness. We can do these things. I've seen small things make a difference. Lifeline will tell them, for example, that simply putting up their signs at points where people attempt to commit suicide reduces suicide by 50%. Putting up signs at fences reduces suicide at those points by almost 90%. So small things can make a difference. And I believe that we need to get some love into this debate. The last person I heard talk about love in this was Patrick Dodson before he was an MP. He won the Sydney Peace Prize. And he said, what's missing when he's talking about the crisis of Aboriginal young people is love. And that's what we can bring as a church. We can bring that love, but we could also, from that loving point, challenge some of these things that are happening. So I want to build as many houses as we can. I think we should be coming to a church as a church and saying, how do we make this work? How do we build our properties? How do we share our services? Because the actual delivery of tenancy management services, if you strip away the mission, you actually need lots and lots and lots and lots of houses to actually just come together. So we should come together as a church. That would be a wonderful thing to do. But at the same time, we can't allow this to just become a scheme where you as church, you're sitting on land, you develop your land, you take the loans, because that won't get the housing need and passed up. That won't give the services, and as I said, we'll be making it for us members of our community. So I'm hopeful we can do something about this. We're really only just starting to take off. No, we've not got to states and territories off the hooks and say, because that 10 billion there, you don't need to invest. We can't let ourselves off the hook as well. And it's a slightly different take what Stella was saying in balance sheet. I wonder how many of us have been presented an opportunity, say, to spend $10 million in, let's say, Catherine. So we did the figures and said, not more money, let's say the money. So we said that $10 million would lift the generation of property in Catherine. I wonder how many of our agencies would say, in doing that, there's no return to the balance sheet. You're just going to spend that money. And I wonder how many of us would say, yes, I'll do that. Because I'm worried that that trend you're seeing out is actually through society we've got. And that everyone sitting on a board goes, well, we're not being good stewards if we run down that balance sheet. But we're not being good stewards if we're not delivering our mission either. And I think that's the challenge we confront. It's difficult, but it's a great answer. You know, my organisation is just as messy and bad as everyone else's, and we make ongoing trees funding like everyone else. I think we need as a church to be challenging this. And we need to be coming together properly, and we need to be actually saying, how can we eliminate poverty? How can we lift people out of crisis? And we really need to look into those with it.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, really. What's really strong in investing when it comes to the panel is it's not about the bricks and mortar, it's about the care and the service and the compassion and the commitment. And so this whole process of government involvement, as when we were speaking prior to this session, two of you say you're not registered housing providers, and Graham, you say you are. I'd love to get comments from the three of you about which way's better. Because I think we're all sitting and listening and thinking, well, how do we engage? We have to become a registered housing provider. We need to work with someone else, but I can sense pros and cons.
So it's worth noting that there is a government strategy has been for many years to actually try and bring a consolidation in community housing sector. Yes, new ones can start up, but the community housing sector is not a sustainable sector until you get to a large number of tenants. So if you wanted to start a small community house and provide a particular project, that might work. But if you think you want to be a player in the community housing space, then I would suggest that partnering, white labelling the sales, setting up a joint vehicle venture where they bring in that knowledge and expertise would probably be the sensible thing to do. Sometimes you're forced to do this because you can lose houses and the government have given you if you don't, of course. But I think it's worrying that as a church, we're guilty of this in a full society. We have 4 different community housing providers just in the community. And it makes no sense really when you think about it long term. But if we have a proliferation of providers, then everyone's going the cost of regulation, that cost of having a software, etc., etc. Maybe there are other ways to do it, either white label an existing service, or if you do have to set up a CHP, actually get someone else to run that part of it for you. But I don't think you need to be a CHP to build houses. You really need to be a CHP if you want to access government stock, or you want to take advantage of HAP and some of the other money.
And we're right in this because we are facing that structural and system impediment that if we want the discounted funding and the funding, then the only current way of accessing that is to be a CHP. And I find that quite jarring because we are trying to fit a service model that we've designed for and a village model and a way of living and sustaining financial well-being for the women that we're building these houses for, and we are using the funding model to drive what the service model has to look like. And I'm really uncomfortable about that. And so we've had a lot of meetings, and government's quite frustrated themselves because we've been to so many government meetings, and every single one of them, wow, we love what you're doing. You know, you're leveraging, you're actually, they're figuring out, God love them, that our model's actually going to save them, if scaled, significant funding. And we keep getting referred to department after department, and they love what they do, and then they have the, you know, computer says no moment where it's like, oh, we don't quite fit into the funding model and the particular swim lane that government department's in. And I think we've got to help them out a bit in the way we can redesign a funding model. And, you know, regulation can change. You know that. If we've got to work to change some of the regulation on rules on that, then that's part of our advocacy work and system change. That's we're called to do that. So, you know, it is a very real barrier, but I think there's a momentum I'm hearing and feeling from you know, a lot of my colleagues, and particularly corporates who are rallying behind, like, literally, what do you need? What do you need? How can we help you do this? There is no way government is going to hit the targets the way they're currently rolling out the strategy. And everybody knows that, and they know that. So there's a bit of an opportunity here to try something different.
So we are a CHP, but with no houses, because we've not used that vehicle yet, but we've become a CHP so we could access funding if we needed to, which is what we potentially will be doing now. But because we don't have that experience or skin in the game, and CHPs do appear to be a lot more of commercial operators. It's, you know, how you stay aligned with mission when you're looking at commercial realities. And we had a CHP approach us about our housing development, and they like, look, straight off the bat, block of 24 units here, block of, you get 50 units here, high rise, and we're just like, that is not, that might be a really good commercial decision, but that is not what our vision is. And so for us, a partnership with another CHP probably wouldn't work because the basis for our venture isn't the commercial aspect. It's sort of something we're working out as we go along. It's not the driver.
Yeah, we might open up some questions at this stage. Please don't leave it hanging here. So you need to ask a question. While you're thinking, I know we got your meter, thank you very much.
My question's for Jayne. Just in relation to the visitor accommodation on the site, is the plan to use that as an income source to be able to then provide the social housing?
Potentially, but what we've found is that to run a really good visitor accommodation service also takes money. So we are sort of going through a bit of a process of, to start off with, it was like, oh, all this revenue's coming in, which is nice. It pays its way, but when you start a venture like that, you see so many opportunities of how you could do things better and differently. So not yet, but I think certainly in time. It is a business.
My question is also for Jayne. There was something about the way you spoke that made me think maybe there's an advantage to working in the Northern Territory because it seemed as though a lot of the things that we were saying were based on building relations, and I'm wondering whether the small population of the Territory and the places where you've got those services dotted all over the Territory lends itself to that.
Yeah, maybe. I think definitely it does. Being in a smaller jurisdiction does give you some opportunities and some opportunity to see your vision realised. And I think also from a territory perspective, we are what we call, I'm not sure if it's an official term, but a mission diocese, which means we have no money. So people aren't guarding their money because there is none to guard. So it means that when we talk to the bishop and he's like, what, you're doing this? And we're like, yeah, we think it's really good. And he's like, yeah, actually there is a real need. So I think in some ways it can be a little bit more informal and more grassroots. And I think that everyone, whether it's the bishop or us in our organisations, we're very close to the problem, to the issues that we're experiencing in the community. So I think it does make it more relational and real.
Okay. Stella, one of the issues is, I've got one, sorry.
Thank you. We're located in most of the issues are on the Northern Territory border, pretty much, and I'm interested in culturally appropriate housing and what you guys will see in your time. In my time, working with families in remote areas, I do know that Indigenous families will centre around the elders and the children all the time, and they live just like this here today, community and everything is shared. And what I've noticed in my time in government and both non-government is that in the child protection space, when we walk into homes that are overcrowded and the risk factors are too high, we are left with nothing else but to remove the children from their remote communities, bring them to our housing. And like I give you an overview of the collection of stories I see repeatedly, is that a child is taken to another community or our country, and then 2 years old. They get to 10 and they go through the system. And they're not leaving the generic system. And then we've got no other choice at 10 years old, double digits, to put them into a residential. And I know what happens with that journey, because the children will start following the teenagers on the streets. And we're headed up the youth justice side. I go back to community, I try and find a teacher carer, and then I'm home, maybe 2 bedrooms, there's 19 people there. I'm never going to get that house approved. I asked Father Housing when I get this mother onto summer approved for the house that I own to take her in the back of the country. It's 7 8 year wait. That child's going to be 18. And we know what happens next. What I want, and what I see when I consult with people in these remote communities, they've told me that what I've witnessed is something that, yes, the housing is inappropriate because we have a Western model of not having 2 kids that we're offering these families, whereas Indigenous people prefer to live together and share. Not all, but definitely in community I've witnessed this. Seeing them say to me that people from in architects from universities got a consultation and created the houses that would fit. However, change the government, change the agenda, and it never happened. And now I just see repeatedly the same story happening over with our young people and the disconnect between the elders and the wisdom and the knowledge that they should be getting in a natural setting. I just find that because, you have grown in these areas, spaces where these things work, and if there's something for the common or the common one, or we can do to help support these families.
That story is very familiar, even in the, definitely in the Northern Territory, and remote housing remains something that is so underfunded, and we are so behind in the Northern Territory and in Australia that to actually get the supply that we need so that people have the dignity of an appropriate house, I feel is definitely into the future. And I think that, and we see that in the Territory all the time, people are moved from remote communities into town after 5 years in town with an independent carer that may not even be Aboriginal, let alone from your own people. To reintegrate back into community is almost impossible, and to give parents that opportunity to build their parenting skills is also difficult. So from that perspective, I think for us, the advocacy and where we see us as being able to make a difference is really in that early intervention space, and being place-based and really putting effort into those early years, whether it's through supporting people to access childcare on remote communities, parenting, all of that kind of stuff. But in terms of our own housing development that we're doing, we are really carefully considering how we have housing typologies that fit multi-generational families, mums who have, 3 older teenage kids and a couple of younger kids. How do those housing mixes work? And what we see on the public housing list is that even a 3-bedroom house isn't really suitable for a lot of the families that we see because of just the dynamics of how those families work and the care arrangements of those families, whether there's kids or sick people or families living together. So I think it's a complex issue that needs continued advocacy.
Just a point around the structure around that. Fundamentally, everything in our system is built on individualistic Westminster models. Everything in First Nations and multicultural communities is built on collective and communal perspectives and ways of working. So until government learns how to disrupt itself and its models in a new way of working and greater flexibility and agility that truly meets the way community is organised and functions, none of the funding models can fit. And that is, I think, the greatest challenge that we're not really talking about.
I think if the community housing sector is going to respond, it's probably best done through Aboriginal controlled organisations. And one of the things we see is that even within the community housing associations that needs to come together, we almost never talk about Aboriginal controlled organisations, and they is a starting point from government. The organisation put it quite simply. The government says these Aboriginal controlled housing organisations haven't got the skills and expertise, so therefore we can't give them the money. So because they can't get the money, they can't get the skills and expertise they need to build up. And it's really requires the government to actually invest significant amounts of resources in this. I mean, $10 billion has been put aside as a future fund for that. Should have been spent with real money on actually building things and giving it. I could spend a fair chunk of that, but we gave over to community controlled housing organisations significant funds of money and let them develop those models. But the community housing sector models, because they are based largely upon the loan type model and banking type model, they do exactly what Jayne was saying. They go in and say, not enough yield, not enough rent, we can't make that model work. So I think until we actually start funding and resourcing Aboriginal controlled housing organisations properly, it's going to continue to be a problem that the community housing sector is not going to win. Movements, social movements start in communities like this, but A small thing happened. So my daughter took up the motor last night and brought with her a bag of beads. And I'm wearing one that was made last night. And apparently there's this thing that started with a Taylor Swift concert where people create these very cheap beads and they go and give them. I had never heard about that before. But this is an entire movement. And I think one of the hopeful things is we can do something as a small community, the service, the individual, and that builds and builds and builds and sort of becomes the norm. And I think if we do things like that, if we actually go and even build the one house, to go and build the one community house that works, we do those little things. Yes, you're not going to get the headlines, but eventually they build up and build up and they build more. So taking action, I think, is the most important thing we can do in this space.
My recent reflection, and something I'm constantly reminding myself, is in this affordable housing strategy that government has. Let's really zone in on the word affordable and for whom that actually is meant to be about. It's not the focus of affordable for developers to build, for organisations to run, for banks and have to loan to. Let's get back to whom this is for, and how do we actually design and build housing where there's not an addiction to a charity funding model where we are building a pathway out of financial resilience and wellbeing, designing places where, you know what, now she won't get a utility bill. That's a lot more affordable. Speaking with other essential services providers, now she's not going to get a phone bill. Now she's going to get access to a battery-run vehicle. Well, all of a sudden, it's affordable to live in a lot more places than the original models we've been designing. So how do we actually disrupt that when we think about, from the perspective of the woman in the house, the family in the house, what would make their financial resilience grow and grow out of a charity state? And I know that's not possible for everyone. I absolutely appreciate the spectrum. But what I'm trying to guard against is a tsunami about to hit of people who are just underneath the surface and absolutely struggling with increasing rents, etc. I don't want to see a fourth generation. How do we actually do some work at that more preventative end?
I think even listening to the others on this panel, I think that the thing that strikes me is that people have to be true to their vision and their mission. And I think in the times when we're becoming more and more corporatised and commercial, and for us at CatholicCare, what has been really refreshing for us is to going back to having a dream and having a vision, and kind of realising that it might be harder, but you can actually make it work, and just how satisfying that is to be able to meet a need in a really, truly compassionate way.
Very much, Jayne. We might leave it there. Thanks very much for your participation and your questions. I think what I would take away from here is that no project is too small. There's ways that this can happen. We don't need to rely on government in every way to make it afford. We do need their support, we do need their understanding where we can get it. But we need to build communities first. Housing is part of that. And we need to be respectful of those local communities. And we've heard great stories about that this morning. So please join me in thanking our panel.